needs for different levels of presentations and demonstrations, and Christina put together some slides in a PowerPoint presentation that can supplement well the one we were doing and the other. We'll go back to it in a few minutes, but we're going to go through here just to look at the basic collaborative environment. And this Rosetta around here like this evolved at McDonnell Douglas. When people start telling you, let's show you what a real organization is like. Around in there like that. But we found it really kind of holds very well that in any collection of people, you've got these different functional or individual activities going on around there, all of whom have need to interact with each other in some general sense. If you don't want to build a support system that doesn't have all that kind of influence. So anyway, this is the sort of thing in the continuous process of knowledge development and exchange that are going on in there. And you look at the sense of it and says, well, what are all the examples of knowledge products that are flying around in there? And you see that there are a lot of them. And small organizations and large, they have them. And then the big question comes with saying, well, that kind of knowledge as it grows, so much of it just sticks in the heads of people, and that really this is the kind of image that you realize that what happens is a lot of it is lost. And the big question is, well, if we kept it all, you'd soon get lost in the middle of it. And you say, yeah, but let's see what you can do in that direction that's better than what is done now. So this is really the sort of kind of thing we talk about. And you say, well, that's compounded, but it isn't just within your organization, because they're working with other organizations. And as things get moving faster, get more global things, more transient things that you could probably outsource activities of the design or whatever, for some week or two of somebody's time. So what happens with the interchange, the memoranda, the comments, the knowledge products that came out of that, so that any of the images of the future, I'd say that there's a real interesting potential for being able to store that knowledge and make it workable and usable. And the conventions about it, well, you can't store it if it's not recorded. The conventions about recording it. So, well, the recorded form has always been in memoranda or something. Oh, well, you can just, like the video and audio that's recorded in here. There can be plenty of storage capacity to keep that. And the kind of hyperlinkage stuff means any little comments you can send an email to somebody with a link to follow it, and there is picking up 40 consecutive frames from the video. If there's an event there, can you explain it? The guy could come back and say, oh, look, some frames that were 10 minutes before and what someone else said. So there's the potential for not only recording that, but all of the interlinking and structuring that goes on. So, there's no quick way to get out of it. Oh gosh.
That's a fairly quick way out.
We'll go back to it. But so what we're going to go back to is this CODIAK box. And you see the same Rosetta and some of the conditions about it. So we're going back now to the other briefing. You're looking at, this is the one we just left. We just saw a few frames in that.
Mm-hmm. So the main briefing, page 5.
So we were looking at this collective IQ boosted, and we were ready to take a look down inside this box a little bit to what's there. You see the same Rosetta, and it says, the basic thing for any organization is you look at the outside world, and you've got a lot going on out there that you ingest in various ways and interact with, and there's a lot of stuff going on inside the organization. So we'd like to bring more detail into that, but just say, all right, that's one way to look at that as an entity. If you're trying to talk about its collective capability for, as you observe it from an outside, is how it does cope with its resources, with its crises, with its challenges, etc. So so one of the things that very early evolved, 20 years ago more, was that there's a set of records. There were three categories that just seem to dominate design over and over again. The obvious one is the knowledge products that you're producing. You're working to make a design or a plan, or maybe your product is a knowledge product, or something like that. So that's the focus. But along with that, there's a lot of dialogue that goes on that's very important. All the drafts, proposals, everything else that supports it, and the collection of information about the outside, from the outside world, that's relevant to this. So in these three categories, for a really good start, it says, all right, let's find ways to handle all three of those, so that as the knowledge product is evolving and these other two boxes are changing, and things from the knowledge product that get superseded become part of your dialogue, etc. So you get a real knowledge base. What's the chances for that to be done in a better way? So these are the examples. If you blow up each of these three categories, the knowledge product, intelligent collection, and the recorded dialogue, and so you say, all right, good. That's kind of nice if you really can get a support system that can integrate all those things dynamically.
This is the first page. So we don't, the slide you just had up there, we don't have.
Right. This detail under it is not included.
See, they just, for each one of these boxes around the perimeter, there's one representative.
Right. Got it.
Boy, this is neat, isn't it? Yeah. See, there's a little flaw in the system right there. Right. Anyway, so the kind of thing that is going to occur is you have a small unit that starts there, and it got its own kind of knowledge base, but it's part of a bigger unit that has its knowledge base going on, and you look at it and realize that it's a concurrent process going on, that the small unit is concurrently developing and doing its thing, while the larger unit is doing its thing. And the smaller unit's knowledge base is a part of the bigger one's, but it's got to have its own coherent wholeness, and it's evolving concurrently with the bigger one. And then you realize that everybody in the whole process, at both of those levels, is concurrently doing his or her thing about all that. So this concurrent aspect, we could have used the CO and CODIAK as being cooperative or collaborative, etc. also, but what's emerged pretty soon is that concurrency thing is the one that really makes it a challenge. So that there are groupware issues, etc., like that can't scale up and cope with the concurrency. So that's the thing you want to support. It's a very dynamic thing, the evolving understanding and knowledge and plans and commitments, etc., like that. So you need to have your knowledge base be that flexible. So that's a big, big part of the whole. We are in a state of confusion here that the computer thinks the screen here is in one state and up there is in another. Okay, now we're synchronized again. But anyway, just this sense of the collective IQ. There's a lot we could talk about in there, but I think we need to move on. This afternoon we can go into more detail if people want to stay around and get clearance. But the thing about the sort of interoperability issue is if you take a sizable organization and draw this Rosetta and say, oh, if I'm going to have a support system that has this kind of electronic storage and access and development, etc., it's got to be something that isn't just something for management and another one for the finance or legal or manufacturing or something. It's got to be something that is interoperable. And the basic kind of thing underneath this is you can follow a link from anywhere to anywhere, which means if somebody in finance is giving a link over to legal to say that particular paragraph is something you've got to consider in here, but when you bounce over the legal one, you can move around inside of that particular context without getting lost or confused. So it needs to be a sort of common kind of landscape throughout all that knowledge stuff. And it doesn't mean that your tool for browsing, etc., has to be the same. But there are some commitments that it has to have the same, it's very important that it has the same vocabulary in what you're doing. But it doesn't have to have the same control interface. So this is the kind of thing that's very important to talk about later. And so in the aerospace world, they says, well, that isn't all. Now look, we're building an airplane, and there may be 2,000 to 3,000 people inside our organizations around the design and the manufacturing and the field sports and all that. But look, there are maybe up to 6,000 companies out here that are providing the component. And the first tier, at least, is heavily into design. The landing gear has to be designed specifically to fit it. So a lot of collaboration between the two of them. All the testing things that when they're delivered to us, they have to have the test data with them that stay linked to every given unit. And which plane it's assembled in, by which crew, on which shift, which day, and signed off by which foreman, etc. Are all got to be kept track of as that gets moved. So there's a lot of interchange of common knowledge with that. So some of it.
Tracks going up and down, and the change requests going up and down.
Right. The specifications that are kind of common are shifting in. So they by that time had learned enough about the system we had to kind of see the potential. And I said, well, how much in that particular enterprise, of all that 6,000 organizations, how much would it be worth to have a system, a kind of a common HYPERDOCUMENT system we're talking about, in play there? So, as he said, the proposals, the contracts, anything else, gee, they all floundered around. These were mid-level executives, and they finally said, $200 to $300 million a year would be easy. Gee, how about giving you 1/10 of that to build a system? but anyway, the potential is very high. But you look at it and says, the requirements for something that in the end, I feel will be inevitable, is the system has to be that scalable and that interoperable. And the reason why not, but it won't, it needs some attention to get there. And so we're saying, all right, that's one particular reason why collectively pursuing this kind of knowledge capability with a collective environment that can really seriously start saying, what would that underlying support system have to look like? So that gets us over here to this open HYPERDOCUMENT system. And you can start looking underneath it. So if this is what you were all waiting for, to me it's very important to have this other kind of background before one starts talking about this technology in here, because a lot of the rationale behind what's unique about it different comes from this larger framework. So of course you say, I need shared files. That's good. Well, we didn't stop there once, because if you remember back in that augmentation system, human tool system, looking for surprise candidates in the human system, I just was fascinated with the language one. Saying, boy, that's one of the best, most significant inventions our society's ever made. Language. And a big part of the way of dealing with it is externalizing the concepts in the mind by, they have symbols attached so we can speak the symbols and communicate to people. And then we also evolved so that we can form them onto hard copy in special symbol forms so that other people can read it and get the conceptual transfer between us. So he says, oh, could a candidate for change in there be such that I can make the externalization a better map of the kind of structural concepts that are in my head? And if that's the case, wow. Of course, that might be all kinds of funny linkages between concepts and abstraction levels, etc. like that. Geez, that'll be a lot of work putting all those links. And you say, well, wait a minute. I've got a computer in attendance there right along, so it ought to be able to make it a lot easier to do that. Yeah, but just think of going through and reading with all those funny pointers and stuff. No, I got a computer there too. It should be able to show me a view at any time of whatever that complex concept structure in its symbolized form is. You give me the view that best supports my cognition, my recognition of it and understanding. Now it will shift around. And when I look at a particular view, I ought to be able to talk about the changes I'd like in it without having to go clear down to the fundamental parts. It'll make the changes in the fundamental parts to see how I've changed and altered the view that I have there. And then I say, well, also, you can cite things and it's all addressable. So that was the concept we started in the mid-60s to say, added to the shared file was structure, that the simplest structure I could think of starting is, hey, make this able to make a hierarchy. And that every node in the hierarchy you can have whatever you want, text, graphics, mixed, etc. And you can rearrange that hierarchical structure, and etc., etc. And so that's what the structuring is. The object linking means every object in that environment intrinsically has an address, so as to make a link to it, to cite it. You don't have to go do something special at the target end in order to have it be targetable, which when we look at the HTML world today, it just makes us wince. We know it's a beautiful step ahead for the world. We say, in fact, one of the very first things that if you bring in that HTML web stuff into your workaday world, it's just inevitable that you get to say the underlying form of this computer-held stuff is that every object in there has an intrinsic address. So as a matter of fact, it has, in our world, it has at least 3 links. One is intrinsic, 2 are non-intrinsic. And one is that you can attach a label claim to it. And then, thirdly, you can get all sorts of other kinds of relative addressing. Go to some node I know about, and it's the one lower level to it, 2 down, and beyond that, the first one is content is so-and-so. That can be expressed in a in an explicit address. You can click on a link and it'll go find it under that kind of path. So, and the viewing means that you can say, for instance, if it's all paragraphs, etc., you say, very common view, so just show me the top level and the first line of everything that's there. Okay, I like that section. You click on it, open up one more level. Pretty soon you open up so you see all the whole paragraph. These are just common ones. So as you work in that environment, but pretty soon you begin to realize there are other kinds of viewing that you'd like to have help in doing. And pretty soon you're doing things and have to develop a vocabulary that just looks totally alien to people when they first look at it. And say, well, that's not surprising. But you realize you want some kind of transition into that, which we find a really neat solution for everything. So anyway, so the browsing around in there is mobility. Like when you start moving around there.
On the viewing thing, because I think there's an example under there.
Simple example of saying, okay, top level view, or just show me. Oh yeah, it's a different color from here too. So this one in this area are just a bunch of single text lines with the numbers on them, and that's a top level view. Those are just underneath those could be much more. Over here is saying, well, let's do it is showing me the first two levels. Over in this one, it's like saying, oh, I've said only show me the ones down to the second level, perhaps, that have a certain content. They get to be filtering. Yeah. So anyway, it's sort of a simple thing like that, but it's so moving around in that domain, pretty soon you just can hardly stand it to load a document and scroll to where you want to go. Because if you know where you want to go, it's in one jump, boom, you're right in there looking at it with whatever view. So it's just very different in the mobility. And once you got it structured like that, you can use all those addresses as part of the operable commands in order that you want to do something. You can sit there and look at something, and as you move around in that kind of geography, you get more and more familiar with that sort of way it is. And it's like if a friend of yours says, you want to go shoe repair places? Oh yeah, let's see, I know the address. But if you go to the marketplace, and you go, you could tell them by that. And that's what you get the feeling like pretty soon. So you jump to some place, oh, you want to copy something you had before. Lots of times you can just tell the system, that's the whole chapter I want, and copy it in here. And just without looking. So those sorts of things start just evolving in the world. If people look at it the first place, they say, oh, that's way too complicated. But if they came out of the bushes and looked at your automobile systems and moving around the city, they'd say the same thing. Navigating around your city is way too complicated for people. So anyway, if you're going to live in a really different world, you get used to all that. So another important thing that we built in that started being operationally usable at least by 74 or 73 was the shared screen thing. So anybody on the ARPANET connected into our world, you could call them up and say, yeah, let's share our screens. And so go through a little protocol, and suddenly on your screen perhaps would appear just what the other guy had, windows and all. And so he could start talking on the phone and telling what's going on. And then I could say, well, hey, I'll show you something, pass me the controls. So pass the controls, I'll just do it, and both watch me do it, pass the controls back. So Christina happened to be working in field support back there in the late 70s, early 80s, and it's a standard way to support customers. A standard way for someone to show his boss, or for somebody who's an expert to walk somebody through and show them something. And so
give a guided tour of an area of the knowledge repository, whatever, design reviews, online together. Can I just interject a point here that what we're talking about are what we derived as what are the basic requirements to go into technological infrastructure to support and boost collective IQ. And you'll find, a number of these kinds of functionalities in different systems. You can have outline processing in your Word documents. In Word, you can say, go to page 10. In Excel, you can say, go to a particular cell, inside your spreadsheet. We're talking about that level of addressability in all the work that you're doing, not just in your spreadsheet. So if you take these kinds of functions and say that it's got to be an underlying foundation to any of the applications you're doing, so that if you were in Word, you would be able to say, go to paragraph 15 or something like that. And you'd be able to address that paragraph when you're not even in the file, and that kind of thing. So we're talking about this as foundational requirements for the information system. And what he's talking about, what we built is a demonstration prototype, basically, of how these requirements can be met, one way these requirements can be met.
Part of this is from the paper we presented at the Report 92. Which was 3 years ago. And I assume that those conferences, you find people that are very supportive of this kind of concept.
We found a few, but in that particular one was very little. It turned out everybody was there to looking for what they could buy.
Let me rephrase it. There's probably 30 companies working on group work kinds of products today, and there's probably another several hundred working on document massage products. Would it be fair to say most of those have people who would subscribe to these concepts
I
today?
really don't know.
Because my feeling is that this, of a sudden, has become accepted understanding.
Well,
Certainly at Aldous, at Apple, at Novell,
the
at
adherence to
at
pages
CDE.
is one of the things that still seems strong.
Say what?
The adherence to pages.
I don't want to focus on specific functionality, but the set in general, multimedia browsers,
That sort of thing. And so we're just
shared
it's a
document,
beautiful delight that
whiteboards.
those things starting to emerge, and World Wide Web gives us mobility.
Yeah.
So we're just trying to tell them, look, if you take that and you move it into all the work you do, it's got that much potential in there instead of just something you're going to publish. That means an email, that means a software source code. So you move it into there and it's part of your everyday environment. Then there are things you're going to have to change and opportunities, etc., that you haven't sort of accounted for. So we would like to show you what you could do.
I guess the question I'm trying to ask is, don't you find a lot of kindred spirits who share that belief now? And what's missing is who would bring it together as a vendor? That there's no one overall pervasive vendor of such services, more than there's a lack of understanding or agreement that this ought to be or would be a nice advance.
And I would say today, even over 6 months ago, today,
it's
there's a readiness to accept this concept.
Drove a lot of this, and then
Right.
otherwise computer immature people say, well, for Christ's sake, why can't you?
Right.
It seems like it's obvious.
Seems obvious, right. Because you're looking at the usage
Whereas the
requirements.
technicians knew how hard it was to do it in each instance. But a user says, why can't you drive? Why can't you have a road from here to there?
It would make my life easier.
These days you already have a vehicle. In fact, you have several vehicles, and you begin to explain how your vehicle is more advanced.
Right.
How does this go beyond Lotus Notes? People understand the functionality of Lotus Notes. They may not, since there's so much hype about it, they may not understand its limitations. And what you call page orientation is still the focus on linear knowledge products. And even the way you describe going to a certain page in Word, it still invokes the notion that there is a linear document there.
Right.
Instead of the fact that all of these linked knowledge nuggets don't have any linear relationship to each other, whatever. And therefore you can add to this system without worrying whether you're fitting between D and E or L and M in some linear system.
Well, you think of the Carta or Sunset Western Garden book on CD. They don't feel really linear. I mean, there are things you can do. You can't do it in any linear format.
But definitely emerging.
They're pretty close to this concept.
And the thing is, you
can
say
just apply that widely.
it's inevitable that there'll be a general open sort of structure and set of conventions. What are going to be in there? And what does it need to support and serve? And what I'm really interested in is saying, where do you get the dialogue for that? And the World Wide Web dialogue is sort of skimming around in a special publication concept and domain rather than bringing it in. But what our experience in these last few months when we're working on ARPA is that just this last week in San Diego with a group of the contractors there was a sudden breakthrough. It was just so exciting for us that the prototype we offered them is saying, all right, you're going to have this repository of reflection. And so somehow you know that it's got to be created by current document systems and such. And you want all this other stuff too. And we said, okay, look, we took couple of documents that we got copies of sort of here like that, technologies like that were done in Word, so ingested them into our
Key
environment.
documents driving the program, the target program.
So ingested in ours, and one of them was well enough written, so it took very little special attention to get it to the structure. And then we made with our Smalltalk stuff, we made two novel kinds of browsers. One of them looks just like Netscape and does the same things. And when the document came in, we had two little buttons on the left of every node. And we said, see, if you click on the middle button, then it jumps to that node and opens up one level under it, and all that's one line each. And you can just walk your way down. The left button will jump up a line to do the upper level. And the rightmost button opens up everything. And so some of the other guys who've just done Netscape browsing that started with that big grins on their faces, big long document, just I was very different looking to them.
Just by applying structure and the ability to zoom in and out.
And then we said, all right, we can give you a whole set of classes of browsers now. So here's a simple what class 2 could use. It provides you some capabilities that are a little beyond that, so you have to show something to somebody about how to offer some more options that give you more flexibility. And they all looked at it and said, well, it wouldn't take long for anybody to want to migrate to that. So you could for any given community usage, you could specify any number of special classes or access to them. And as the browsers got higher in their class, they started integrating the editing. Until at the end you got what we had. And he says, all right, this was a very exciting thing for us because it didn't mean any longer people had to move into our world all at once. And it was very exciting to all those people about. So suddenly there were more people talking about, we want that in our environment. And,
I don't want to jump in both, but why couldn't you just go see Adobe and Microsoft and say, here's this technology, embed it just like a spell checker, and do it, and get on with it.
yeah.
And maybe frame while you're at it, which is, of course, now Adobe too. So I mean, it's exactly analogous, I believe. It's just going to be so obvious when people have it. But it's just a piece of technology overlaid on that, isn't it?
No, it's got more to it than that, and so we're anything about actually looking for partners to go after this. And one experience we've had in the past is that if they don't spend quite a bit of time living in the midst of this, they don't appreciate a number of the architectural things that are built into it. And so you say, all right, how do we get partnership with them so they don't just take it off and make it look like what they think it ought to be, but they live with it for a while, involve it. It's great. So this is
running two levels. One is when HP did New Wave, it did attribute and behavior work with objects on icons on the screen, and it was really the right way to do it. And Microsoft plagiarized it and made Windows, and used the motif icon structures. And I was sore as hell for 5 years that was really wrong-headed. Well, and you look around 5 years later and you say, Microsoft had it right, and HP had it wrong. Because since that, they boosted 100 million people to where they thought iconically. And Apple would never get to them, and HP New Wave, nobody could write a program in it. You know, so there's a level that says both avenues have to be pursued, I believe. It says, man, everybody would come up the power curve if you just laid that on them.
all right.
Through a Word document. And then, you know, and they only come up a certain level. Meanwhile, you keep working the partnerships and do the truly sophisticated piece. I guess I want to and both answer rather than either or.
Well,
Am I greedy?
Someplace in the middle. No, it's like I've experienced decade after decade. It's like people get excited about part of it, and their image that they communicate to you of what they do about it then is like. You know, it's a car with only one speed forward or something. So then you say, well, that's okay if that doesn't make it another 5 years before we get to add 2 speeds or something. You get to be general. And so it's so the thing about, anyway, it's exciting. And one of the real things about it is the actually focused coherent application of that in significant knowledge domains is what's important, necessary in order to know how to evolve the generic independence. And if people go charging off to do it for independently for different knowledge domains, how much longer will it be before there's some chance of coming to developing like that? So it seemed to me it's, that the end target of this collective knowledge capability is so important to society that I keep feeling responsible somehow to carry the generic thing protected and moving.
I think the problem in viewing this as software potential, in the good examples you gave, is that in an organization, the MIS department installs the newest version of a network and loads the newest version of groupware, and then they go away. And the human systems improvement that it takes to exploit that is nowhere to be seen. And people use the new technology the same way they use the old technology because they don't have a new cognitive organization that it would take to... The engineers knew what the concept was, but it never gets down to the user, certainly not in the Microsoft manual. And therefore, insisting on a total process approach with each adopting organization is probably the only way to bring about the human systems improvement in parallel with the tools improvement.
Would it happen as people are using this new technology that they find they can do things they didn't do before? And everyone also has an idea, because everyone is overworked and they got more to do than they know how to do, so how do I do more faster? So they begin to find better ways of doing it. Doesn't that happen?
Yes, and at that rate, I will learn every possibility in Word and Excel before the millennium. But that software will be so old by that
time. The next millennium or the next one after that?
Well, if I'm optimistic, in another 5 years, I'll really understand those packages through that process of discovery.
So there is a lot of value in that process of discovery, the natural evolution. On the other hand, if you are really busy and you're in the midst of trying to get a product out and that kind of thing, what you really need is a handbook that tells you just what to do. How am I going to set up my knowledge repository? How am I going to, what kind of conventions am I going to do? What kind of format should I instill in these documents so I can get the best value out of them inside the utility of the repository and that kind of thing? Those handbooks don't exist. And to the extent that you can get them out to the people, whatever lessons learned there are in best practices, that's how you're going to move your organization forward much faster.
Well,
This is ongoing support.
Ongoing support, yes, it may not be ongoing internal support, but it's coming from somewhere, and who's going to put those together?
Can the tool itself teach the user to use it? Can the car teach the driver to drive?
Well, if you know where you're going, it helps.
Yeah, the car can teach the driver to drive. We used to do it in my experience. My brother taught me how to drive. He had a big old Lincoln touring car, 1926, I think it was. And he was teaching me how to drive, and I was sitting inside driving, and he was sitting on the front right fender telling me where to go. So I think the car taught me.
Well, there's a lot like...
Was he poised to jump? Is that why?
Well, you know, in those days, we didn't drive cars quite as fast as we do today.
There's a... On one hand, it's... if you look at somebody using a skateboard or a surfer or a windsurfer, a skydiver, and you look at what they're doing with technology and what evolves in the design of that environment now, if things got commercialized very fast and nobody went ahead and explored, so I'm interested in is how do you explore till you get the same kind of human connection with the support technology that you see in some of those expert people there, that you never believed that that's the way humans could do it. Well, you never believed that that's the way organizations could connect and get technology until you explore and get that push.
That's very interesting.
You freeze the technology early. And so one issue that when the personal computers emerged 11, 12 years ago, I knew some of those guys, etc., and I tried to tell them that you better start getting connected to networks. And there was not only an ignoring it, there was an explicit rejection. no, but I want my own resources. You tell them it's like having an office without a door or something.
Well, let me tell you why you don't want to connect them to. Foot Locker took 4,000 stores down for 7 hours 8 weeks ago on a Saturday. You couldn't buy a damn pair of tennis shoes anywhere in the chain. Macy's bankrupted the company because they flipped to an online transaction processing system that didn't work, and they took it out for 33 hours.
Is that
on the fourth
an
week.
argument you use about personal computers not being?
I would use it as an argument that you want to understand the redundancy and the impact of your systems on your company. And people didn't.
We're talking about the personal computer.
Well, I understand, but
so are you saying that those are the arguments that people should not have thought about netting, putting the networks, etc.?
I would argue that until the world has a chance to understand what the network implications are, you've got some real risk to network it. And a lot of the arguments of the people I knew, at least, on the personal computer isolation was exactly that we don't know how to build a healthy network. So I want to have these things in isolation.
Because otherwise you're opening up a Pandora's box.
So
what does it learn from that
You could have both.
situation? I mean, this always happens. I mean, there's always, people will put out a product, whatever it is, whether it's a computer system or a cup, and there's something inherently wrong with it, but it takes a particular mistake or a particular situation for that to be brought out. And then you fix it. You go back and you change it. You fix it and you learn from our mistakes.
I think that's terrific.
Right.
So I'd say put this out. I mean, let's get this out. I want it.
Doug,
that's part of collaboration.
You said something a while ago that sounded to me like it might be a great idea, but I just want to bring up, you were talking about the skydiver and how rapidly the skydiver developed to make use of the developing technology, if I understood you right.
If you watch people like that operate, and you marvel at how they can do what they do, and how the two things evolved so much so that
So it evolved very fast.
They're using human skills that you'd never have guessed would be there to do things in mobility, etc., that you would never
Now,
guess.
the driving force there is that whoever's doing skydiving wanted to fly. Now, making the analogy then to what you're talking about, if we had some way of getting companies to want to do whatever the encapsulated vision of your methods are, like collective IQ or something, so the companies would really want to accomplish that, then they would learn it.
So what's the improvement path that's going ahead? I mean, you have to have a path that allows for the evolution, foresight evolution, and there's no problem in people commercializing subsets of these things. If that isn't promoted and pushed as now we're there.
I think it's a good time to show them mode 1, 2, 3, 4.
Yeah, but let me just bring up this point. Let's say, I'm thinking of this book that we're putting together. If we could have something in there that would be a very attractive goal or destination or objective for companies like flying is for skydiver, and here's a way to get there, does that make sense?
What's going to motivate?
What is the
What's the driving force?
What is the attractive consequence or result?
Well, that's something to be interesting on here is to say where are analogies useful in trying to give a person some orientation about that there are possibilities and the ways to pursue them, and where so you'd have to look at the candidate readers. These people would be candidate readers to find out from them. Just some of the observations.
It struck me we've just hit some interesting ground in the sense you've got a pretty strong view that the networks should have been put in PCs early. And I think I heard you, William, say that there's way too long a discovery period for even spreadsheets and word processors and the persuasions and PowerPoints. And that it seems like it's left a chance for this stuff. I think that's the argument is, should this stuff be left to kind of slow evolutionary pathing, or should it have some more synergistic active, dynamic driving it, and your argument would be strongly at the latter.
Well, I think that it's not an either-or thing, and that's why, if you could, can you bring up...
Well, what I just wanted to pose is, and I've been on the other side of this argument most of my life,
I'm anxious to see
are
what this argument
spreadsheets, should people learn spreadsheets? And first of all, do they know spreadsheets today? And has that helped the basic math orientation and awareness and understanding in a populace that uses all this stuff? So, I mean, there are 45 million spreadsheets still in there. It's a lot. Fairly interesting mathematical capability. Now, my assertion would be very few people know how to program a spreadsheet. What they do is follow templates someone else wrote.
I think there are higher cognitive operations that benefit from this. It's not so much that your math gets better, but you learn to categorize, and you see the dependencies that you didn't see before.
That's the point I wanted to make. No one cares about a spell checker, but the spelling got better. No one cares about whether you do right arithmetic at a Wendy's with you know, a burger and a cheeseburger and a lettuce add key, but you got the transaction done quicker. So I think that's what we're after.
That's only
how do you move it up?
Spreadsheets and spell checkers are a very minute part of knowledge.
But I think you can
How
basically
people
assert
work.
almost no one has learned how to use a PowerPoint or persuasion or even a word processor very effectively past what they used typewriters for or artists for. And yet those that have get very excited, right? Isn't this on that continuum?
Right. We're talking about
So
if you have ways and the processes by which the work is done, etc., for which there are more powerful ways in which you can harness. Am I saying that right?
probably.
So the people that go ahead and find more powerful ways get excited if there's a way in which that can make a payoff. So how do we sort of get it for people to realize that they move up this line? Well, a lot of it is organizational. That so what if Joe can move on up the line in that spreadsheet? It doesn't make much difference in the organization unless there's some way in which that new capability adds to his contribution.
Well, I guess that's where I go back to this antecedents, behaviors and consequences thing on the human side. Seems to me that's the place you can expect that you have to anticipate that more work goes in. My argument is that there are pretty good tools that we have not begun to realize the power of some of them at these lower levels.
They're only tools. They're only tools. I mean, what are you really trying to do in business? Management spends its time trying to allocate resources. Where should you spend your time?
I think I'm trying to say that. I don't know how to say it well.
Well, I think one point in this is...
How do we bring that to bear? That's
right.
the question.
I understand your question. One of the points is that, you have a tool there and it's worth nothing until you learn how to harness it. We could give you all of this stuff and it would be meaningless unless you really know how to set up a repository and manage it and all that kind of thing. So you have, two choices there. If you're going to start investing more in how you harness things and how you really do your job better. I mean, that's the level you want to be thinking at. Is you want to accomplish your mission better and be more effective. And so you can start making those advances on the human side with today's tools. You're going to be doing a huge investment in the human side to better harness today's tools versus if you slipped in the future tools sooner. That investment would give you a lot more leverage because you'd end up with much higher capability for the effort that you're putting in.
Okay, so that's the other piece of the argument, is that the tools are, in fact, still so primitive that the effort involved in learning this.
If you evaluate a tool in terms of, like we said before, automating today, gee whiz, good. So
and the relative value that you get out of using that tool versus something that's designed to really boost your capability.
In the progression of tools, you have to say that the earlier tools were harder to learn and they could do less. It's like Woody Allen's comment about the Manhattan restaurant where the food is so terrible you can't eat it because the portions are too small. You can learn to use Word more easily and you can do so much more. So the tools and the ease of learning seem to be moving toward a crossing point where the tool will be very powerful but also fairly transparent.
And that to me is what the spell checker did compared to those other tools. It went in the background mode and you don't think about it. It just gets invoked and every once in a while reminds you that
It's all this stuff. I'm not an IT person, but this stuff just gets in the way of what you're trying to do. It's still developing. Eventually, all this enabling technology was so good if you're just like using a telephone. You pick it up, you couldn't care less which network is carrying it. It doesn't matter which device you're calling, which brand of telephone you're using. You couldn't care less who you're calling and which brand, whether it's a GE or whatever. It works.
Yeah, but that's not the part of it that takes the learning, etc. It's sort of how do you use your telephone. And when you have something like all the digital support like that, it's a lot more than just telephoning that you can do functionally. So how do you...
I think one point that you're trying to make is that the way things are so primitive now that you're often tripping over the technology trying to use it. I mean, just the other day I was at a very high-tech place and I brought a diskette with that PowerPoint presentation on it that I wanted to print, and they had the same printer and it was Macintosh to Macintosh, but they had one higher version of PowerPoint. And the thing came out with a little tiny symbol on each page and that was it. I'm not going to spend a day, you know how long it takes to try to troubleshoot those things. But is that the kind of thing that you want to be able to just shoot off a document to somebody or have them come and look at something and get into it and without having to worry about all that stuff?
I have a feeling the discussion has several levels that we're not coordinating with.
But I would like that browser. Get word.
But I got interested in all of these because when I was 13, I found a car that was quite a bit older than I was, a 1916 Model T in a barn. It had a brass radiator and everything. It hadn't been used for anything, so I paid $8 for it. And that must, the way the consumer price index has gone, I don't know what that would be worth now, but over the next couple of years I got it running, etc., and played with it. So I got really interested in old cars and history. And that's led me to thinking of if the people that are projecting what you do with the transportation world, the personal transportation world, if in 1910, after 5 years of really pretty active marketing and so things come out, people says, okay, we're going to now design our highway systems and our laws and our financing and our driver's regulations, etc., like that, what would they look like compared to today? If those got ironed in because people couldn't see beyond, well, the way this other technology is moving, these intervening 85 years are going to be much, much shorter. So the thing about looking ahead enough to know, I look and watch people casually merging onto a freeway at 60, 65 miles an hour. And you casually look in the rearview mirror and you blink your blinkers and you move in that lane. And if you told anybody back then that they could bet their life on what they see in a mirror going at 65 miles an hour, they just would not have believed it all. So what would the highways look like if they'd been all designed by them? So that's the thing about saying we have to be pushing the exploratory ahead there so that what we invest a lot in infrastructure is something that's appropriate to actually how people can learn to harness it. So anyway, let's move. What we did. So this is the 1960s kind of thing we did there. And in 1970 we added. I did both of that, didn't we? 1970, this is where we added email into that. So the same kind of structure, addressability, linkability, etc. as in email items. And at the same time, we added another thing which is just very, very potent is the journal system. And that proved to be just a tremendous winner in there that any kind of piece of document, from a one-liner up to a multi-page big thing like that, you can submit it to this journal system, which is A lot of it is software, and then some of it is the way you administer it like that. But when you submit it to that journal, you do it via the same way you launch an email, except here what you can launch is either the text of it, your message is going to get put in the journal, or a link points to a whole big document file that's going to go into it. And you have new fields if you want to put into the journal that says, oh, this supersedes one of the other items, or here are the keywords you can fill in, etc. And when you finally say go, the system takes that file and puts it into a protected environment in which it's guaranteed no one else can go change it, and they catalog it, and it's got a very succinct address, the name of the journal, and the journal number. And so in our links, our URL equivalents, anytime there's that kind of syntax, you say, oh, it's a journal, it hands it off to that journal catalog controller, that goes and gets it. If you've got authorized access to that, or if your server is part of the connections of servers that subscribe to a given journal, it goes and gets it. So what that means is that you can write something in another journal item, another file, another email, that can point to passages in these journal items with total assurance that the reader of that, all they have to do is click and they can see what you're talking about. And where it's controllable, and it's guaranteed to be as the author published it on the day it says it is, on the hour and the minute it says it is. And some of these things can be cycled around in minutes. Something gets put in the journal, and 20 minutes later somebody submitted something else that's commenting on it. And those things are part of an anchored dialogue that they say. So it doesn't sound like a very big deal, but it just changed the way our customers all over the country, it impacted very much the way it worked like that. So that again is something that the equivalent of that is a very important thing to have in the world. So we also added early in the 70s the way in which external records, etc., could be cataloged. And part of the cataloging provides it that when you put something in a journal, you can actually take note of which one other journal items prior to that you were pointing to, so the catalog can tell you, when you look at a given journal item, who else has been pointing at it, what other journal item you're pointing to it. And that can be much enhanced with the backlinks in the future. So that array of things in there made a system. And on top of that were built applications. And the technology things like saying, oh, our windows don't belong to a utility or application. A window just holds a view of one of these multimedia documents, and I can bring in whatever application I want to apply to it. So mail comes in, okay, you click on that, the basic editor, or click down there, the programming thing, in which you can file a say or something like that. Flip into another one that works on the tables that are in there for spreadsheets and things like that. So that kind of change, just those things all said, well, I've got a middleware level here of the medium in which all this stuff works and the ways it can be viewed, and then lots of flexible applications on top that don't own the document. It just changes the way the whole marketplace and how people can work together, and provides for this potential very large interoperability. So that's a quick rundown of...
In a primitive way, wouldn't you say that Notes or Unix Notes earlier, or the computer conferencing systems still did a portion of that same thing? And then the World Wide Web adds one more piece to that, and it's sort of an instance proof without some of these fine granularity features. Mostly does that whole thing today?
But nobody I know does a journal. But that's incidentally like that. And there are other things in there. Nobody that I know sort of does it that the document fits into a window and your application doesn't own it. You can bring in different applications to work on it. So that meant that you're very flexible about...
I think I would assert differently that nobody does the features as integrated and as cleanly. But the basic core functions, I think, are done. I think journaling is actually done fairly well in Unix Notes. And in the Eyes Network collaborative communication telecom.
This is a kick because her brother Bob was programmer in the Eyes Network for 10 years, and he's just jumping up and down about the kind of architectural difference and generality and stuff. So there is an argument that a lot of pieces are not floating around. And what we're trying to say is, if you get a real coherent picture of where this is all got to go, and let's get in a dialogue with it. We've got a lot to offer here about that path to that general open and interoperable environment. And so that's a big part. And so the thing about, well, if you go...
my view would be those were very primitive systems compared to what you're outlining, but they had essential ingredients of all of this, and the power they had for smart, or let's say, experimental user communities was profound. Which to me says the set, done in an integrated CODIAK all the way, should be a smash hit.
You think so? So that's what we'd like to...
You said her brother. Who were you pointing to?
Her brother Bob. She's here as a visiting one, so she's sitting in there with me. And Bob is a small talk programmer that's been giving us as an observation. He comes to us from New Jersey.
Okay.
And so...
I guess some of that stuff is there, and for companies that are trying to... Companies, I think, are still struggling with, is the value in people working together? I don't think that's a real given there.
What's a company for? It's a collection of people trying to do a common pursuit, right?
No, I agree with your point. I think most companies don't buy that principle.
And so moving forward and using the 80-20 principle, getting something that, I hear what you're saying, and I buy into it, but from a practical sense, where's the company going to spend its money? I think a lot of it is building just that far ahead of where it is today, and trying to get some banked benefits from people working together. Still not a done deal.
I think it's, my experience has been that if you go to companies that really have bought into it, it's a real culture shock for somebody coming out of another company environment to work there. It's practically a whole new way of being, and it's shocking to the system.
We have major cultural. We have the biggest refinery system in this country, and we have for many years different refineries acting as different empires. There's absolutely little or no collaboration between them. We were more likely to collaborate with Texaco or Exxon than a fellow refinery because had all this competition, and that's all the human box.
Right.
In some instances, organizations are structured that way intentionally. With Packard, you've got inkjet printers are in a different organization than laserjet printers, and at the fringe, they're going after the same market. And whoever wins out, that's the way business goes.
At least HP one does.
Yeah.
But
that's where the incentive is.
I keep repeating that I don't try to say how the organizational structure and the modes and everything should end up. I would say the evolutionary process could use a lot of help in being more effective, so it climbs the hill and gets there more efficiently. And that's what the bootstrapping is about, and that's the real thing driving me all this time.
So whatever it is you think needs to be attacked in the organization or whatever first, then how you're going to go about pulling off that coup and transforming the organization that way. These are all the underlying enablers that
Now, are you trying to, this consortium you're trying to put together, is the purpose of that to get funding to take this demonstration system to a prototype or a production deliverable kind of thing? Is that the idea? Or is it
the main thing what we want to do is, the idealistic goal is to prove out how bootstrapping works, how network improvement communities is adopted. And this particular kind of capability underlying that would really make a big difference, plus getting people to work that way. So that's what we're really trying to do, and along the way, that collective should be able to capitalize upon the kind of exploratory technology it's going, because in order to explore it, it's got to have sturdy enough prototypes that they can pound on it in real heavy pilot operations. And so in order to support the evolution, that evolving prototype can't get caught up in market, but it should be able to spin out lots of good market stuff. There's no argument about that. So
but that would not be your purpose. Your purpose is the research contribution and
the evolution, and what we really like is that research thing could get resources coming back to it by the spin-off of stuff that goes commercial from its commercial property.
So the idea would be to bring together organizations to try to get the government to fund the underlying technology evolution, and that the member organizations would be funding their own exploratory pilot applications of this type of thing, the exploratory discovery of best practices and all of that they then can share with the other participants and leverage the research.
The framework we built up from that first consortium that folded included how does the consortium then benefit from the commercialization of the byproducts. That's helped us go, because it's the
so compared to an MCC, how would you characterize, how different is this strategy from an MCC strategy?
In some significant ways. It's saying, hey, we're not going to set up shop in Austin, and that's where the research is.
and Fremont instead?
No,
and throw results over the fence.
No, it's distributed. And if you can't practice it, don't try to sell it. So we go back over to look at that C community, that improvement community, that really making the heart of that community be this kind of distributed, collaborative work.
If you look at, actually there's a model of it in the supplemental briefing on page 9.
Supplemental briefing, how many of this?
Sorry.
Does it look like this?
No, that's the main brief.
Well, you should have labeled
The one that had these.
Yeah, that's it.
These
You
two
should have labeled
ones,
them A, B, and C. Oh, no,
Page
X,
9.
Y, and Z.
yeah. It helps. Yes.
So you're looking for advanced prototypes and advanced pilot trials. It is kind of what you're after right now. And the idea is that ARPA funds the advanced prototypes.
We've got a lot more encouragement about knocking on the door this summer with that specific proposal.
So that's true.
And one of the
advanced
things,
pilot trials are the people collected here plus 10 others, companies that are like those ones named
Right.
somewhere.
So the collected group would be an advanced pilot, and then theoretically each of them in their home organizations would be starting to plan pilots and carry on, inside their companies, and then bring those lessons learned back in.
Well, how many companies are doing something along these lines today? Wouldn't there be quite a few
candidates.
doing their versions of the kind of thing you were aiming to by maybe
Well, let's just look at saying as if we were going to be in the marketplace of these kind of products, how would you start evaluating and doing the advanced development, exploratory development for your product? One way you could depend upon your customers out there. The other way you could have a laboratory that's exploring it. So what we're talking about is a different kind of real involved laboratory, ABC community and things like that, which they're in control of the evolution of prototype. And they're not waiting for some vendor to come out with his exploration and tell them what to do or what makes his marketplace. And the kind of small talk proved to be a really neat kind of implementation language because it's fast and rugged. You make a prototype out of it, etc. like that. So this is the model really was, and you couldn't find a better hill climbing product evolution environment from that, because it's under control of the end user guys, and they're really involved in technical community stuff. And the thing that ties them together is the very prototype they're using. So this, if we went around here a little bit, just bear with me, we'll go through a little bit more. Is one of the things you're talking about is, suppose how do you go about developing? So suppose you've got a big organization, and I know the capability is distributed in a very different curve from this, but I couldn't get the geometry to work, so just bear with me. So there are lots of capabilities distributed around there, and one of the things you say is, I will lift the whole organization up. That's what you like to do someday, but unless you've got a lot of good guidelines or something like that, in some kinds of things, you redo the retirement benefits or something, and that somehow will lift everybody's spirit and do something. But the real way to do your trials is another one. This is, I'm going to get a small group of people and push them up to some really new level of experimental capability. So how would you do that? Well, I could go find these 10 guys that are doing this product development or something like that. I'll boost them. And I put my hand and says, well, it's pretty hard to find 10 people, all of whom are sort of uniformly ready to willing to go out there and go through boot camp and do everything else they're going to try this. So I think you'd better do it by recruiting 10 people with a little bit of selectivity in there and tell them, you're going to have to really do things differently. You're going to have to go through painful realignment and everything else. But look, career opportunity, da-da-da.
So you think of that as being, if you think of how you're going to populate the outposts or whatever, put the outposts in the frontier. You need to have expeditions out there, and you wouldn't put your common everyday people off the street into an expedition necessarily. You would take a geographer and a geologist and what do you need on that expedition, and they've got to be willing to go through all kinds of stuff and put through the ringer and put up with each other and all that kind of stuff, and come out with whatever results they can. So you think of it that way, that there's also going to be the natural evolution of the man on the street, quote unquote. But you also can get a lot of benefit from really pushing the envelope as far as you can with a small group of.
So in some experience back through the years, we had the business of about 8 or 9 organizations buying into this thing. And in each case, what we told them when we contracted to give them support, this was in the mid-70s from SRI, we said, you have to assign somebody from your staff whose role we're going to call the knowledge workshop architect. They're essentially the B kind of person. And we'd rather not have a programmer. And we're going to start meeting and having these people get together and share. This was the first MD on to kind of see. And so every meeting they'd all bitch and groan about how hard everything is to learn. Jeez, Till after about a year, over a year, one of the guys was sitting there. He finally says, gee, I haven't heard that around this. We're bringing in new people. And what everyone began to realize is, sure, that first pursuit was very hard. And this is something in there to say, oh, you think you're going to augment somebody and they think, how are you going to augment it just by making some things faster? So I came in one day and tied a pencil on a brick and said, hey, write with it. How long could you write? And how well could you do? Would that change your way of taking notes? Would that change your accounting? Yes. So the obvious of that thing. And the other kind of thing is saying, there's a tricycle analogy of, you can soup up a tricycle as much as you want, but that isn't the way people did it. And so, how do you get to a tricycle? Well, something like this is going to happen. You get people that say, look, we're going to move you on to bicycles and you're going to learn. And then set up and find out how you operate. Or you could have said, we're going to move you on skis and we're going to move up in there and find out how you do in the snow. Or we're going to equip you so you can live underwater and big bells and stuff like that. So that's the kind of... So what this guy learned, we've seen ever since, is once you've got the group working up there at some new level, you bring in new people, and there's just no flap. They come in, look around, see everybody working like this, and pick it up, and it takes some time, sure. to them it's not the same kind of grinding sort of problem. You see it. So that was a very important lesson. So you see that mode 3 is something to do about. The other one that's important is say, once I get a group up like that, if I want to replicate it, it's a very different matter. So these were approaches to consider if you're going to put outposts up there, and then find ways to deploy them in your company and replicate them or expand them. That you have these options in there, and some mix of them is sort of the way you're going to end up doing. So that makes it, turns out, very nicely supported in this kind of a model of going to that network improvement community that we talked about before. So on that one, we may as well just jump to the end result. So if you've got these other objectives in mind, etc., you know how to do this kind of open knowledge work, building this knowledge products. Boy, if these people are banding together to operate this C community, by lots of people who spend time coming in, working in this environment, going back to their Bs, and a lot of their work and participating at that C level is done from their home, that's commercial stuff. There's a lot of interesting bonding that gets formed by people working like this together, even if they don't see each other from month to month. So anyway.
So actually, I'd just like to make a point here too, is that the difference in our thinking between this type of collaboration versus your normal association. The normal association, people come together and exchange ideas and go off and do work. And we're thinking of this as being more like a program where the work is being done by a group that convenes together. And they're also doing work when they go away. But that they actually have, deliverables.
Well, you quickly said this is different than MCC because it's not in Austin. Conceptually, that to me is what MCC tried to be about.
Yeah.
How does it differ?
Well, you don't deliver reports at the end of every period, something like that.
So the type of deliverable is different.
It's dynamically evolving all the time. The Bs are right involved, and the transitions from C to B to A are part of the process. The continuous involvement.
And using the advanced technology and practices enable that level of collaboration in a distributed fashion, so that you can get infinitely more input and feedback into the different groups.
What is MCC?
Well, I guess the reason MCC was the microcomputer consortium down in Austin. Lobbying and my view is that's what they tried to do. Maybe they did it imperfectly, but they tried pretty much to have 50-member, 12-member companies, each sent 3 or 4 people, and they hired a bunch of really smart people who started with the core. And the idea was we're going to work on what it is you say you need to do, and we're going to send it back to you, and it's all going to be cool. And it wasn't cool at all. It was hopeless. And I don't want to repeat that experiment.
No,
What went wrong? What's
This
different about
this?
this?
It looks the same organizationally, perhaps, but I think the big difference is that there's a huge channel of information flow and share and exchange of knowledge between the C, the B, and the A, and across the C.
That infrastructure needs cultivating. So, what other chance do we have? Collective knowledge work, if it's going to work, boy, that's what the B's doing collective work at that C level are all about. Collective knowledge work moving in so B's do their job. And knowledge transfer, technology transfer, that's what the CODIAK basically is. So it says if you can't make it work in there, you're not going to ever get it to work. So, because the C is that's its prominence. That's you in there to make it work. So the very first prototypes and the very first higher performance team stuff sits in there to make that C work. But B participants are helping design. So how you make the CODIAK and the C work, and they're the customers. So if it's not working, how do you? So
I'd like to add a comment about evaluating these pilots. The research that I've done in evaluating advanced information systems shows that when you focus on the primary mission and you see how much improvement there's been in the primary mission of the organization through the system, it's very difficult to show improvement. And that's because organizations focus on their primary mission, and at any cost, and with whatever wear and tear, organizations usually get their primary mission done. So and pushing the ceiling of its possibilities anyway. So you cannot generally bring in an information system that's going to improve the primary mission a great deal. But then you look at the way the information system has had secondary effects on the organization. For example, bring a good medical information system into a hospital. The mortality rate may not change very much, but you start looking at a number of other variables like errors in medication orders, the detection of drug interactions. The things that were slipping away before are now being caught by that system and having a small incremental effect. Or on the human side, when you bring good, open electronic conferencing into an organization, suddenly status distinctions that made all the difference around a table like this are no longer as important, and ageism and sexism disappear because you can no longer pigeonhole every person who's communicating with you. And these secondary effects, if we give them their proper importance in the scheme of things, are what we should also be looking at when we evaluate the impact of this kind of system.
Our committees were looking at saying, how do we assess and evaluate? And we're saying, that's certainly a C-level challenge to find out what's the best way. So test it out. What's the literature? What do you bring in? So that's part of the handbook, the C's are building for the B's. So all these different kind of things. How do you, if you're trying to go it alone in your organization, you wouldn't have the kind of collective capability that that C community has. Bring it in, integrate it, digest it, make it available. So you're saying, and that's a living example of what you're going to try to move up the line. So that's a very important place to put the very first prototype push on. And you assume that the customers are all aligned with trying to make it work, so they're not going to be bitching about the wrong kind of things for a while. Anyway, so it's a model, and it's, so we'd say, well, this is my sort of strategic framework. I'm just terrifically oriented about trying to get that out there working. And it's like saying, does anyone have any alternatives to try to improve the improvement process and to get the way this technology can get folded into organizations and
to learn how to boost collective IQ.
Say again?
And to learn how to boost collective IQ.
Yeah.
So we've gone the loop pretty much.
I have to say, I appreciate this a great deal. I've heard one facet of this at a time from you for several years without ever seeing how they all connect together. This is extremely useful.
Well, an alternative would be failure, and descend into chaos or the end of civilization or something like that.
Sort of like today?
Yeah, sort of like today. No, actually, we're doing, considering the state we're in, we're doing pretty well.
We're doing pretty well, yeah.
Considering the state we're in.
Look at that. It's like in ARPA, the focus of the program we're tied into is how can they better handle the complexity and urgency of a joint task force that's brought together in a crisis that may emerge within a few weeks of that crisis, and they have to put, maybe it's humanitarian support or what, but they have to put a crew there with the necessary spread of capabilities. It's military, you've got Army, Marines, Air Force, Navy. Okay, what are the resources we could put together there? How soon can we get them there? Who's going to be the commander? What's his staff support? How is he going to know about weather, about all kinds of other things? So that's a crisis that unfolds very rapidly, and it's very complicated. Suddenly you have 2,000 U.S. citizens here on this island that have to be evacuated.
Or that might have to be evacuated.
Yes.
Or there could be 3 other scenarios that could unfold in 24 hours, and then you have to be ready to have to minimize this. Or
So,
the earthquake in Kobe. I mean, the Pacific Fleet was ready before Japan was ready to even hear what they were ready with. I mean, with blanket and tents and all that kind
So
of
we're trying.
They wanted our help, but they also didn't want it
Right.
at the same time.
Right, so there's also the political aspect.
So that's we're trying to point out, and feel like we made a breakthrough with them, is saying that kind of capability is a collective knowledge work thing that would be terrific if you guys went ahead as a real prototype up there pushing. That same thing is useful all throughout our society, our organization. Like you can maybe our legislative process with them. But we discovered that they all thought about the word repository, where all the records and such were put. So we said, oh, all right, now what if you had a really enhanced repository, and that's how we brought our stuff in. We really showed them that this class 1 browser that they could go through in very unique ways, and class 2 that could do even more, and it really does. So there's a lot to shake out in what would be a really workable prototype. What are the architectural things that need to be built into the underlying middleware structure of this kind of document so that it really can be generic? And you start getting close to that, and then, boy, it's ready for other products.
People tend not to like generic stuff, though. People tend to like to put their own fingerprints around stuff, which is good.
Well, it's sort of saying what part of it needs to be generic. It's like you have to have a generic solution, like SI11, the conventions for printing, that first page when you start. And so those are generic conventions that let it
In
work.
most places.
Right, so this is like saying that that document of the future needs to have generic conventions in it.
In England, that's not the convention.
In Japan, the cover of the book is what's the backside to us.
That's right.
I would echo, Bill, your comments about, I've seen, because I haven't interacted much the last few years, but this certainly brings me up to date from when we did a lot of work 10 years ago. And it resonates very well for me with what I've seen work, and it tries to do most of the things that don't work. So I think it feels fresh, it feels vital, it feels like the right kind of area to be explored. It feels like you've got a shot in terms of the mechanisms you're trying to establish. It's impressive. It's very impressive. I think there's some other things as well that might be useful to address in addition, or to help maybe serve some of this that we can explore later.
It keeps on evolving, doesn't it?
It's terrific work. And I think that last piece you shared about how you find the outposts or how you find these splinter groups is a very important element of how you might find some success, or find some companies that will help sponsor what you're doing.
The first bigger group where we spend a lot of time to talk about when I go back to my organization, what kind of pilots? So you watch over the successive months of these meetings. These meetings weren't to actually be a subcommittee, they were trying to make a plan that would work towards it, but the effects were starting to be the same. As the wilder-eyed pilots would start talking together about it, and they begin to realize more and more about, hey, you don't go out and take this 200-person group and start trying to that. So it was
similarly, a pilot is not just figuring out, shaking down your training before you roll it out in the organization.
Right.
I mean, the pilot is really understanding how that can improve your capability, and then roll it out. Figure out how fast to get out there to the rest of the people.
I think the important thing is to tie it to a real business need. We've been doing this for a number of years in different areas, similar pilots, but it's not been called a pilot, it's real. And as a result, it's got real senior level support. And we've been using, in many cases, notes to enable and glue the group together, but it really has been face-to-face, shoulder activity reinforced by sharing some knowledge behind the scenes and back at their regular work.
So what is the driving motivation for doing
Business survival.
survival?
Oh,
Well, I'm trying to think of what.
It's a
what
very,
is the appeal? Let's say we're putting this book together. What is the appeal that we make to say that this is something that's worth doing?
I think if organizations don't collaborate, they will go out of business very soon. You have to, because people are doing
Survival.
That appeals to the CEO.
Is everybody else familiar with this book? Am I the only one that doesn't know this book?
What?
I don't have any idea. When you keep saying this book we're doing, I'm clueless.
Oh, well, that's why we're having
we all
this
doing a book
seminar.
or are you doing a book? Or?
Doug is doing a book,
You just wrote the
and
first
I'm putting it together. It's going to be a very small book, but it's addressed to a business audience, managers, executives, professionals in business organizations.
Here's the title.
Here's an example.
The books are getting bigger now. This was in the first set of books.
That was all what the world knew about vision, mission, and total quality at that point.
No, what we're trying to do, we have each of these books written by an authority on some subject, and we're trying to get the essence of a big book into a very small book. When you read any book on business management, read a book on teams, read engineering, read any of these books, and there's certain ideas that are important that can be said in a lot less space and a lot fewer words. And we're trying to use words and visuals and writing style to get a big content into a small book. So it's something that you can put in a briefcase. You can read it in an hour. And then we include at the end of each book a short reading list that have big books listed down if you want to read more about this particular subject along these particular lines. So that's what we're going to try to do with the book on Doug's work. So naturally I'm interested in how it can be applied, because I would want this book to go into companies and people reading it in companies that, hey, we can use this, we need this for question mark. What is it used for? And we can start doing it. You don't have to wait until Doug has done $10 million more research before you can start using it. A lot of this you can start using right today. You can be a pilot, but it can be more than a pilot. You can be doing a pilot that's really going to help your company. It seems to me but how do we express this?
That's going back to the deployment business. It's the early things you're doing an exploratory way of trying something out. How do you deploy that so you can actually benefit out of that investment? So when we talk about pilots, we're not talking about something sitting out there by itself. It's the strategy of it. But I didn't mean to interrupt the flow. But the question you're asking me.
That's why I was asking you why to do it.
The thing is the value.
What's the real driving need
Yeah,
today?
what's the drive? Like when Doug was saying the human system and the technical system for the skydiver developed together very fast because I guess they wanted to fly. So we want to do something, and in order to do that, we need this.
I think in our case, I could describe a couple of different reasons. From our customer viewpoint, what their needs are is one thing. It's a very process-driven need. And from the technology that we're implementing for our management information, it's a very process viewpoint. But traditionally, I think organizations are struggling with getting beyond the more traditional organizational structures of functions, and it's breaking down those walls to meet the business needs, the management information needs, and our customer needs.
The national marketplace.
Right, exactly. That's another reason, the global.
All over the world.
Set up separate companies all over the world, in Vietnam. How do you communicate effectively? How does one person learn what the other person is doing?
Not very effectively. I've seen several evolutions of organizational structures in international business. None of them work. But all of them would work if they had the right information system. We try to solve the problem by the way we set up a structure. But actually, the thing that was missing was the right kind of an information system, because probably any one of those structures would have worked fine with the right kind of an information system.
You're still going to have problems. You can have people right physically next door to each other. One with a world-class process for doing things and one with a desperate need. And even if you have great information systems, you have everything. Unless you can change their behavior in one looking for help and one offering the help, nothing will happen. So I think that the human side of this is by far, by a factor of many, the most important thing.
And is survival a strong driver on the human side?
I think
survival
so.
seems to have been affected people negatively.
If you look at
fired.
if you look at all the things that people hang on to right into oblivion.
Like, putting your foot on the accelerator as you go over the cliff. It's a common thing.
When you get down to the bottom faster, you don't have to worry so long.
Well, there are things like, take the term coaching. I can't see how the evolution will take place unless you start, there's going to be some real coaching roles. And that's really a B type of function that I think we need to look. And you say, well, what's the career path? What's a career path to being a B? The career path never gets turned on to is climb the A ladder. But you say, well,
because almost all the company is A. If you look at it in terms of percentage of investment, people, resources, so how much is A? 95%, 98%? And the small part has a big impact on the A. Say B is much smaller and C is smaller still as a
question
percentage.
for the world is what percentage are they going to have of resources in B and C is an aside. And then if anything is rotating, it would be an awfully valuable career path to rotate down through the C and D into an A path. So that there are just a lot of things to think about and explore. But that career path is, when we were talking about that what we need if we're going to build this first C community is at least 2 people from each organization become, one alone gets lost in this path, she goes back. So, and we call them interns. They're going to come and roll up their sleeves and just live it. And people say, well, that isn't a good term to use. Well, whatever term. But the other one was, somebody brought up one day, well, how are you going to get a guy who should stay in this for a couple of years, right? What's happened is he's off his career path. So what kind of a career path future is your organization sort of supposed to offer a guy if you want to induce good people to come into this? Oh, that's an interesting problem. There's just a lot of practical things that you get faced with very soon, and you want to seriously start finding ways to do it. And if it looks hard, you come and say, well, what's your alternative plan for coping with the change in your organization?
Well, career paths are changing too. Instead of being off the career path, that person might be more on a career path.
That's the kind of thing you say, is that, look, being a really strong generic knowledge worker is probably one of your safest investments.
One thing I would like is I'd like names, addresses, and phone numbers from everyone here.
I've created a roster.
Because I might want to check drafts with you. And when we finally get to this book, if we get to it, and we will, and we'll do it pretty quickly, unless we fail in the effort, then I'll be happy to send each of you a copy of the book.
Just one interruption is we have lunch for everybody.
Okay.
Box lunches, and if you come over here, just grab something with you.
Yeah, I need the specific mailing address and phone number.
I'm getting the information from everyone so I can do
But before we break that much even, we can do more showing this afternoon or something. Would you like to find out if anyone can or is interested in staying longer after lunch?
Well, everyone will be invited. I'm not sure what's going to happen after lunch. I have some specific things I want to go over with Doug and Christina on the mechanics of where we go from here that anyone can sit in on if they're interested in. Doug also says that he can demonstrate some of this technology, which I'm sure he's interested in, and we can plan to do that first. Because
one thing
all
I
of you
wanted
would
to
be
tell
likely to
people,
be interested in that.
let me interrupt a little bit, see what we title things now, Doug and Christina, because she's invested 10 years of her life over the last 20-some years of this. So it's a team, okay?
But it's not in alphabetical order.
Well, we'll rearrange it pretty soon.
Are you two related?
She's my daughter. Yeah. Oh, you
Sure, I can't say name.
So, if you could leave me your cards, I'd appreciate it.
Okay, and I'll be
If you'd
giving you
like
a
my
full.
card, I'll be glad to give you that.
I'll be giving you a full roster. Make sure I have your card also.
I gave you one.
Hope you all brought two.
Okay, there's pastrami, roast beef, turkey, and ham and cheese. Mostly turkey.
Those sound good enough.
Are we taking a break then, or what?
Yeah.